Be good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mary Joyce Takali, as usual, your host of the African Young Leaders Foundation Youth Dialogue Series. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this edition of this week as we talk about young people and human rights. So before I start, I would love us to first hear from our panelists. So allow me welcome my distinguished panelists to come and introduce themselves and what they do. Before I start, in no particular order, with me, I have Josiane Adolphe, the founder of She Is Girl Foundation, and Mr. Mishek Cheleka from Zambia, who is the AYLF National President. So Mr. Cheleka, kindly unmute and you introduce yourself, your name and what you do as far as human rights are concerned and other things. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Ms. Mary, I don't know if I'm audible enough.
Yes, please, you're audible.
All right, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here this evening. And unfortunately, I won't be able to switch on my video right now because we're experiencing unbearable power outages in Zambia. So only have power for 2 hours most of the times, and it's very sad and unbearable, especially to the young people. So my name is Mishek Cheleka, like you said, and I'm based in the eastern part of Zambia, in Chipata specifically. It's a nice place. I would invite everybody to come through. It's very nature-centric and, an interesting place to be at. So I am the national president for the Zambia chapter for the African Young Foundation Leaders. And I'm very excited that I'm on this call this evening. And what I do, I am part of an organization that is known as Lizu Community Network. So what we mostly do is just to empower people with information and basically just digital innovation for inclusive governance and also sustainable development. So that's what we mostly do. And I'm looking forward to just learning from you, Ms. Josiane, who happens to be part of our Zambia chapter, and everybody else will be on this call so that we can just together shape the Africa that we want. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. You're welcome, and we can't wait to hear from you about your ideas and the work that you've done in your community and how you've overcome the human rights violations in your country. Ms. Josiane, you're welcome. Please unmute and introduce yourself.
All right, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
All right. So my name is Josiane Adolphe. I'll say this again. My name is Josiane. The pronunciation is Josiane Adolphe. I'm a law student at Cavendish University, Zambia. And I'm also part of, just like Mishek has mentioned, the Zambian chapter, AYLF. I am a founder of She's Girl Foundation, which is an organization that aims at promoting a better future for a girl child. So we're mainly focused in mental health advocacy and human rights advocacy for the girl child specifically. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and I can't wait to see where the discussion leads us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Josiane. And I'm sorry in advance if I'm not able to pronounce your name, but you're welcome. And the work that you do in your community is so commendable. And that's why you are here to share your perspectives with the rest of the young people and maybe inspire them to do the same work that you do. So our topic of theme for today or tonight is youth as defenders, advancing human rights for a just and equitable society. So today we want to basically focus on the role of young people in promoting and protecting human rights across Africa, because we know that, I keep saying it, that young people are the biggest population in Africa. We're not saying that we are putting all the burden on you, but we believe that we have to do something since we are the biggest population. We have to do something about something that happen because young people are affected most by these violations. We see young people being affected by violations like child labor, trafficking. We just had a topic about trafficking and realized that young people are affected most. So how can young people actively participate in shaping policies, advocating for marginalized groups, and ensuring that accountability for human rights violations is done? So, and we believe that youth have to be at the forefront of fighting for human rights, because we are among the marginalized groups or communities in Africa. So we're also here to see how we can be able to use our energy and creativity. I keep saying that in every dialogue, we have the energy and the creativity. How can we leverage on that and the platforms that we have to ensure that human rights are not just ideas, but are also reality? So before we go ahead, I would like to welcome you, Ms. Josiane, to come and put this theme into more perspective, give it context, so that our viewers can be able to understand what are human rights. Because I believe some people hear about human rights and don't even know what human rights are, what their rights are. So it's really important for them to first know, and then they can go ahead to choose and see if they can join the call to action in fighting for human rights and fighting for a just and equitable Africa at the end of the day. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mary. So, human rights, these are entitlements or claims and privileges that a person has by virtue of being human. Why do I say claims and privileges? Is that there's a difference between an entitlement and a privilege. And so human rights are both entitlements and privileges that a person has simply because they are human. And so human has young people, old people, men and women. So just you being human, you're entitled to these claims and these privileges, right? And so where can we find these human rights? These human rights can be found in international instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When you just go to Google and just search the word Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you actually see the document, and it has about 30 articles that talk about human rights. It was the first. It was the first step that the United Nations took in recognizing the human rights. So the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, has these human rights. We also have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This one talks about mainly civil and political rights, rights such as freedoms. Like I mentioned before, there's a difference between an entitlement and a privilege. A privilege is a freedom, like the freedom of assembly, the freedom of expression. That is not a right, it is a freedom, it's a privilege. And the difference is that a privilege can actually be taken away from you. Yes, a privilege can be taken away from you, but a right is an inherent, you're born with it, like the right to life, right? So the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights has these rights and freedoms. So that's where we find the freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly, the right to life, the right to free protection from torture and inhumane treatment. So that's where we find these rights in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We also have the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So this one mainly has rights that have to do with employment, rights that have to do with the society, like the right to life, the right to an adequate standard of living. So those are the rights that are occupied, or that are found, in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And we also have, these rights can also be found in national constitutions, such as in national constitutions, African constitutions, all right? So talking about Zambia, because I'm from Zambia and I'm more familiar with the Zambian constitution, these rights can be found in in Part 3 of the Zambian constitution, which we call the Bill of Rights. I'm sure in other countries as well, they have that particular part that talks about human rights. And so just to shed more light on the theme, the topic is youths as defenders, right? Advancing human rights to promote a just and equitable society. So a defender is a person who acts individually or with others in order to promote and protect a particular ideology. Human rights are already identified as entitlements or claims that a person has by virtue of them being human. An equitable and just society is a society where everyone can access resources equally. So it's a society where there's equal distribution of resources. And so just to break it down, the topic is youths as promoters and protectors of human rights in order to attain a society that is fair and just with regards the distribution of resources. So that's how I can respond to that. Thank you, Mary.
Wow, I already love where this conversation is going. Thank you for helping us understand what human rights are and the different instruments that we have that help us protect our rights. I would like to ask you further to help us understand what are the key human rights issues that we have in Africa as far as youth are concerned, because youth is what we are about today. What are those key issues that affect youth, human rights? Yeah.
All right, so the key issues that are affecting human rights. So human rights issues, these are challenges that prevent the enjoyment of human rights. So we're talking about things that prevent youths from enjoying their rights. And before I go into those, let's just outline some of the rights that I'm going to be talking about. So we're talking about the protection from torture and inhumane treatment. We're talking about the protection from discrimination, the right to education, the right to employment, equal pay for equal worth. So these are the rights, some of the rights that, of course, the youth have, with in conjunction with the other rights that are provided for in the UDHR. So the human rights issues. So let's talk about the human rights issues. So the challenges or the human rights or the things that prevent youth from enjoying these human rights are, firstly, let's talk about lack of employment, right? We talked about the fact that human youths have the right to employment, but then look at the state that we're in right now. How many youths are actually employed? How many youths are employed and getting the money they deserve for the work they are doing? How many youths are living in poverty at the moment? So these poverty, employment, little wages, these are some of the challenges. Look at discrimination based on gender, looking at the female youth, right? Based on gender and nationality. Look at sexual assault, of course, and lack of quality education. There is education, quite all right, but is it quality education? So poverty, employment, little wages. So I did a bit of a research, and I found out from the Human Rights Commission website, a report that they submitted stated that about 2/4 of youths in Africa are unemployed. That's 2/4 of youths are unemployed. And about 1/4 youths are employed, but then they don't get the necessary wages that they deserve. And then we have those that are living or working in poverty. And I found that that's about 72 million of youths in Africa are working, but working in poverty. And so that's some of the challenges of human rights. Firstly, poverty. Look at rights to do with social and economic rights. These ones require for resources, education. Look at education, employment. These require you to have resources. And so if you do not have, that is a challenge. Poverty is a big challenge, not only for the youth, but for Africa as a whole. And so poverty, right? Lack of employment and little wages. I think I'll just end there to provide for the next speaker to, do that. But so poverty, very little wages, and poverty, very little wages, and lack of employment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Josiane. It's really wonderful to hear the issues that we have, because it's going to help us to be able to come up with strategies on how we can be able to join the call to action. So Mr. Chelek, I've not forgotten you. I feel like you've not spoken for some time, but please come and help us understand, because now we've seen these issues, the human rights issues as far as youth are concerned. We want to know, because our topic is about what role the young people can be able to play as far as these human rights are concerned. So Please help us understand that, how young people can be able to join in advocating for and protecting the rights, human rights in today's society and in Africa at large. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Berry and Josiane for the good submissions that she's made, especially in making us maybe basically understand what human rights are. And maybe as I begin, just to share what we can do as young people in general. I love to have conversations that really relate to our perspectives as communities and as citizens, right? Um, Personally, I mostly do work in rural areas, and I have a lot of stories and experiences that I can share, especially when it comes to the misconceptions of what human rights are really, especially to people in marginalized communities. And that's where we really need to touch on and maybe just bring out the perspective of what misconceptions exist and what really human rights are. But before I do that, I would also like to just maybe encourage people, especially those who are listening in, to not to exaggerate or just think about human rights as extravagant stuff that exists, but just you going to school is a right. I think that is the conversation that we mostly need to have as citizens, as people, as individuals. And then the other thing is the whole essence of countries ratifying, or rather just being signatories to these international bodies or continental bodies, is basically after that to localize the conversation, to bring these human rights into life, into various perspectives. And like in the case of Zambia, we have civic rights, or civil and political rights, and also we have social, economic, social, and cultural rights. And when we look at it, most African countries, I guess that's the case. Mostly we have the civil and political rights that are mostly, looked at as rights, as they should be, compared to the social, cultural, and economic rights, because mostly governments say they do not have resources to speak to the issues that Josiane has just talked about, the employment issues, the issues to do with favorable work conditions and so on. So they shun away because they know that citizens won't be able to hold them accountable, because they know that they do not have much resources. But they mostly concentrate on issues to do with the freedom of expression and so on, which are mostly also infringed among citizens. So people on the call should begin to understand that these human rights that we talk about mostly, or that are talked about mostly on various media platforms or in communities and so on, especially in marginalized communities that are rural areas, we need to make people begin to understand that they have like what Josiane talked about, entitlements, brother, privileges, and so on. And it is not a favor that is done by the government, but it is an obligation that the government must fulfill. So we have the categories, or rather the obligation that the government has. They need to protect, fulfill, and also you know, and also respect the rights of citizens. So it's very important that citizens must be taught to say, if the government builds you a hospital, it's not a favor, but it's a right that you need to access that health facility. If the government provides you with free education, for example, in the case of Zambia, it is not a favor that the government is doing, but it is simply an obligation that they are fulfilling. They're respecting your right and are also protecting your right. So when I talk about human rights, it's very important that citizens, people, and young people should understand that these are just basic things that we deal with on a daily basis. Just you accessing a certain service is a right that you have. But most of the times we take that for granted, because when we hear about human rights, we think about other things which might be even bigger than the thing that we are talking about. So even as we reach out, now that I'm responding to your question about the strategies, the ways we can localize the conversation, it's by beginning to understand that these are things that we are born with. It's not that we acquire them from somewhere. We are born and we already have rights that we, in fact, even before we are born, because we have the right to protect life. So it's very important that we have that conversation, especially with people who have a lot of misconceptions, especially in rural areas, who see as rights that have brought division amongst communities, who see as rights that have brought issues to do with the foreign culture or whatever thing that it has brought to take away the actual Africanism and so on. So our duty as young people now is to begin to have conversations within our communities about what rights are. Of course, there might be other issues that might come out that maybe might be, a problematic to our culture and what we believe in. I guess there's always room for us to dialogue and look at how we can localize those conversations, those rights, and how we can domesticate them. But then, the other thing that I would like maybe to share in conclusion of my submission this morning is that there's a need for us to have young people at the forefront in fighting and demanding that these rights are mostly, respected, they're protected, and they're fulfilled. Why? Because we have a very bigger role to play in accountability as citizens. And that doesn't necessarily affect the older, generation, because most of them, they're falling out, and it's not, God forbid, some of them, they might be falling out even right now, right? And it's us who are remaining, the young people, who will then be living in a country that is maybe corrupt, a country that is not respecting human rights, the country that's not doing the right thing. Therefore, we must be able to put in place measures that will enable us to demand for what belongs to us, to claim our rights, and also begin to have these conversations amongst ourselves. So just because we have a right, it doesn't mean that we are accessing it. So just because we have a right to education, a right to health, a right to not to be tortured, right to respect life and so on, it doesn't mean that we're accessing it. And that's where the problem is. Our major issue right now is that, yes, we have a list of rights, but are we able to enjoy them? Are we able to access them? Are we able to have this conversation that the things that the government promises that they will do within those rights, are they accomplishing them? Are they meeting our demands as citizens? Those are the questions that we need to begin to ask our leaders, to begin to ask ourselves, in as much as we have conversations in our various communities. In conclusion, the role that young people play, and that which we must play if we are not playing, is that we need to begin to hold ourselves accountable and hold our leaders accountable to the things that, affect us. I've done quite a lot of work in communities where people did not know anything about holding their leaders accountable. Holding leaders accountable is just simple as, now it's being called as a social contract. What they say and what they do and what are the outcomes. Then we look at democratic accountability. Should we vote for them when they do not fulfill their promises, or we kick them out and find other people who fulfill our promises? It's simple as that. So we need to begin to have conversations, because we are the current generation and we have, much more to lose than those who are already in power, those who've lived on earth for some time and so on. So for us, the thing that we need to do now is that we have fresh ideas, we have the energy, we have the creativity. And now what we need to do is to, play a role in volunteering, activism, advocacy, community engagements, and just playing a role in teaching each other about accountability and making sure that we push forward for what belongs to us, not in a violent way, of course, because we also need to respect other people's rights. So we need to understand what these rights are in as much as we would want to claim them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. That is very amazing. And I believe that if anybody is listening or viewing, they're learning something. I want to read some YouTube comments. First of all, I want to thank you all for watching us and commenting and giving us your thoughts. Adnan Nikita, who is always here, he's saying, okay, this person is called Olivier Isingwize from Rwanda, and he's saying he's happy to be with you at this time. So there is Martin Maroy. He's saying he's from Kakamega, Kenya. Shout out to you, Martin. There is Biringiro Emmanuel, who is also a part of AYLF Rwanda. He's saying, I'm happy to be with you here. Charles Chuck Donasiano Gusto. Young people are the key stakeholders in promotion of human rights. Sadly, most young people do not know or are not privy to their own rights. And Yvonne Sombirani is saying, watching from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you for always being here and even participating. It's sad that most young people do not know their rights, but that's what we are here for. We'll do the awareness until to the last person. So we'll do the awareness, we'll do the education, one young person at a time until we realize and we shape the future of Africa. So Ms. Josiane, I'd like to come to you because I know I've been following you on social media. You are this person who is doing advocacy and a lot of work around human rights defending. I know that from the gender perspective, but also from the general perspective, because I know most of these issues cut across. So for someone who is willing and inspired to become a human rights defender, after hearing Mr. Cheleka telling us the role we are supposed to play as far as this topic is concerned, what are the challenges that human rights defenders face, and how can we be able to address them in this Africa of today? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. So I was also kind of inspired by Mr. Chaleka's presentation. And what are the challenges, the human rights challenges that these human rights defenders are facing? So firstly, let me address the issue. He spoke about it a bit, but he did not really touch it like that. But the unfavorable laws in Africa, that's a very big challenge for human rights defenders, because when you're going to to do activism or advocate or say something or just go on a move, right? Some people opt for protests and demonstrations. But then we have this law in Africa that is called the Public Order Act. I don't know if you've heard of it, but a lot of African countries have the Public Order Act. And this act, as much as they will convince us that it's very good, I'm telling you that this act is the biggest challenge that we as human rights defenders are going through. This is the biggest challenge that is affecting us, the Public Order Act. What do I mean by this? The Public Order Act has provisions that will allow the police to arrest you if they find you protesting in the name of it's unlawful, it's violent, you're not doing a peaceful protest. But there's evidence of people that have been arrested whilst they were doing peaceful protests, and the police cited the Public Order Act and said these people are in violation of the Public Order Act. So one of the challenges I will bring about is the unfavorable laws. This Public Order Act infringes on the right of expression, right? You as an advocate, you who's coming out, you want to bring the government up, you want to put the government to be accountable, you want the government to be transparent, just everything that Mishek has mentioned. But you coming out and influencing your fellow youths to go out there and demonstrate, that in itself can actually become, the Public Order Act can be a challenge for you. It can be a barrier for you to do that, because it's so unfavorable. The provisions of that act are very unfavorable. Let me bring it home. In Zambia in 1995, we had a woman, a lady, who challenged the Public Order Act, right? Her name was Christine Mulundiga. She challenged Section 5, subsection 4 of the Act. And that section was quite all right, pronounced by the court to be unconstitutional. But the funny thing is that the act still exists even now. That act still exists even now, not only in Zambia. I did my research and found out that Kenya has that act. Uganda has the Public Management Act. It has that. And so it's so sad that that is one of the challenges, that our own laws are becoming the challenges that are affecting us. So what I can advise is, you as a human rights defender, make sure that you're legally right. You're on the right side of the law. Being on the right side of the law will be very good, because it will help people who see that you were right. They can come in and say, you know what, this person was doing a peaceful protest. Why did you arrest them here and that? So the Public Order Act, the unfavorable laws, one of the challenges being faced by young human rights defenders. We have financial barriers. This is a big issue as well. I remember I talked about poverty, but finding supporters, finding someone to fund your idea is a big issue. And you coming here, you must really have a big plan. So finances is a big issue. It's a big challenge. Youths who are not financially stable tend to look for sponsorship or funding from the government. Others look from the government, others from opposition political parties, others apply for grants. But you see how this becomes a challenge is, imagine a youth that has that is applying or that is getting funded by the government, and this is a youth-led initiative that is talking about accountability and good governance. Obviously, their activism will be affected because they're getting funded by the government. And so where you get your funding from is very important as a human rights advocate, as a human rights defender, where you get your funding from. For example, those who get funding from opposition political parties, while as they're opposition, yes, but once they get into power, they also start to threaten you to say, hey, you can't question our governance system, also will stop funding you. And that's one of the challenges that young people are facing. But one of the challenges that I myself would relate with is societal or social and cultural barriers, social and cultural stereotypes, right? So firstly, I talked about the Public Order Act, financial barriers, and now social and cultural barriers, social and cultural stereotypes. This is something that is mainly affecting female human rights defenders. It's hard to stand up and speak as a woman and people agree with you, especially in societies where they're still old-fashioned, the patriarchy system is still doing its thing. It's very hard as a female human rights defender to just stand up and speak and people get what you're saying and value it. Even not only as women, even not only as females, even as youths, there's still that stereotype to say youths are, there's nothing that they can do, they are useless. I attended an event where they talked about this same stereotype of saying youths are useless. And it's very common in the older generation to say the youths are still babies, they're still learning, they don't have experience, they are useless. But one thing I can say is that the youth are not useless. It's just that they are used less, right? If we get the youth and put them in parliament so they can help us with decision making, we wouldn't have laws such as the Public Order Act still in effect. And so what my advice would be, the challenges that these human rights defenders are facing, social and cultural stereotypes. As a woman, you cannot say anything. What can you say? Religious stereotypes. Women are supposed to be behind closed curtains. They're supposed to be seen and not heard. So once you try to speak out, it becomes like, you can get isolated by society. And financial barriers, like the people that fund you, it can be quite challenging. And also the law, right? I talked about the Public Order Act. The unfavorable laws are challenging in of in itself, like they're challenging advocacy. And so as a human rights defender, these are some of the things that you should look out for: your finances, the law, and the stereotypes. Make sure you're very strong in that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Josiane. Most of the things you talked about, I resonate so much with. And to me, the problem is usually that, for example, you say some of the challenges are culture and our social constructions, and we know that most of our cultures in Africa uphold practices that really are harmful and violate human rights. For example, female genital mutilation. And if you come and decide to talk about it, you get a lot of backlash and resistance. So it is really too hard for human rights defenders. But regardless, we push until we realize what we want to realize. So, Mr. Mishek, Josiane talked about how human rights, the challenges that human rights defenders are facing. But we know that because the world is moving and the world is evolving. It's a digital world, and we realize that most of the activism is done online, is done on social media and media itself. We saw how the young people of Kenya were able to really break down the details of the financial bill, and everyone got to know, and they came together, they mobilized, and were able to, go on the roads and demonstrate against them. So it showed the power of young people and the power of social media. I would like to ask you how young people can be able to harness the power of social media and other digital platforms and tools to raise awareness and also mobilize action for human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Mary, for that very important question. So before I answer that, there was a comment by Gusto on how youths are the key stakeholders in terms of the promotion of human rights, and I felt that was very important. And I just thought of adding a thought. There's need for us to offer capacity building, especially to young people, and that is one of the things that we mostly do. And for us here, including even in partnership with the AYLF and the organization where I work with, is one of the things that we do is go into the rural areas and capacitate these young people. It can be in simple things like governance, understanding the system of governance, socio accountability, democratic accountability, issues to do with public resource management, and so on. That is the information that most people need. And you'll be amazed at how people just, don't know about these things, on how they don't know that even when leaders, obliging to what they need to do, is just them doing their work. People just think as if politicians are gods and they just need to worship them on a daily basis and so on. So when we begin to capacity build these young people in various communities, then we are training a cadre of young people who are going to really defend our countries, communities, and the continent in itself. And we also need to train young people in leadership. And that is very profound, because sometimes, the biggest challenge that we have currently, aside from the, resources and the things that Josiane mentioned, the biggest challenge that we have is our age. So the moment that you mention your age, people think like you are a joker, you don't know anything, like you haven't lived enough for you to have that experience. So the only way that we can convince most people who do not believe in young people is when we have full capacity in our leadership. And that means that we also need to portray good characters in terms of how we handle ourselves, the way we brand ourselves, the way we carry ourselves. And this leads me to the question that you've asked on how we can utilize and harness social media to push for certain laws, push for certain policies, talking about human rights and so on. And that is the work that we do on a daily basis here back in Zambia. I'll give you, a practical story. In 2021, we had the general elections in Zambia, which was, a massive general election because it was mostly comprised of young people who voted. And most of the studies that have been done is because young people mobilized themselves using social media. They shared information. They talked about how the economy was. They talked about how the governance system was, how the previous regime was, and so on. And then people began to see that these things are really happening and we need to change. We need to do this. We need to talk about these issues on a daily basis. So I've been involved in a couple of campaigns. I'll give you an example of two. So there was a campaign that we did back here in Chipata, where I am, called the Yellow Card campaign. And we were talking about through the organization called as Alliance for Community Action. So we were doing, showing a yellow card to most of the corruption and issues to do with the things that were happening in that time. And that proved to work because most of the things were, done away with. The other example is how we organize and mobilize ourselves through the same initiative when we ran some Twitter polls on how best we can question the public resource management in terms of how some things were procured and so on. And if you look at all those examples, you find that they worked to our advantage, including the general elections that I talked about. So it's very important that we as young people need to begin to utilize social media and, the internet, these online platforms to mobilize ourselves, to talk about different issues, even as we are doing right now. It is because of the power of technology, and that is what we do on a daily basis. But that poses a challenge on us on how best we are built in terms of understanding these social media platforms and also taking our time to learn on how they work. So what we also need to understand is, if, let's say, for example, I'll give you the perspective of Zambia, because we've done a couple of activism protests and advocacy issues. You find that when you call people physically, especially if it's a protest, people won't show up because they're scared that they will be harassed, they might be beaten, they might be harassed, in short. But if you took the same campaign online, you find that people will be protected to some extent, because it's not very easy to track each and every person at once, and so on. So what we have mostly encouraged people is, if your mentality is that you cannot protest, you cannot go to the street, then be a keyboard warrior. You can talk about the issues that affect you in your community just by posting them on social media, tagging relevant authorities, talking about the, inconveniences that happen in your community because of certain issues that are affecting your human rights, and so on. So we need to utilize and harness social media, because it is something that is really helping us to mobilize. It is helping us to campaign, even do petitions. It is helping us to, share our experiences and stories. So there are quite a number of ways, and this is this is a different session that I can even invite people to just attend one of our online sessions as Lizu Community Network, where we share stories about how communities are transforming using social media. So there's a project that we do where we share stories through video, and people make stories using video phones, and mostly it's called community journalism, where people just are trained in basic journalism styles on how to write stories, how to present their stories, and also how to use their voices to do narrations if they want to. And you find that even a person who is in the deep rural areas, they can even use their languages just to talk about infringements of human rights and share those stories to the world. And when we share those stories to the world, it is through that people begin to see that there's a problem that is existing, and how then can we collaborate and work together. So we do not need to belittle what technology is, and we shouldn't look at it from a perspective of what it has done in a different way, that is the disadvantages, but we need to look at how best can we utilize it to unite ourselves, to mobilize ourselves, and also to work together in sharing personal stories and experiences that will change the stories of Africa and what is said about us. For example, if you look at what people say about Africa, outside there, it is not the actual stories that happen in our communities, but it is because the information that is flooded on their platforms is what they consume. That is why they have a perception that Africa is a country, not a continent. And we should, it should frustrate us as Africans, because by now we needed to tell our stories differently. We need to share our stories differently. We shouldn't be sharing our ads where we are seeing flies all over, dead bodies, or children suffering from hunger, but we should be sharing innovative stories of how our stories have changed communities and how we are embracing human rights. And not only when we have infringements, that's when we see, stories flooding the media in the Western world or in other continents and so on. So our role as citizens is that we need to share our personal stories to the world. And it is not only the stories that we tell to ourselves within the communities, but we need to tell our stories to the world so that they have a different perspective of what we are really and what defines us as Africans. Therefore, I call upon everybody to just utilize social media. I can go on and on and on to talk about which platforms works best in Africa. I can talk about how you need to handle yourself on social media, ethics, and all the basics of the things that we do. But it is something that we can take long. But I would just encourage everybody to even follow us and just see the work that we do, even the Zambia chapter that we'll be doing soon, in terms of how we can utilize social media to just express ourselves online, because it is also our human right and our digital right, and also talk about how we can harness that in the daily work that we do. But of course, the most important thing is telling our stories to the world. And that is very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. I don't want to repeat what you said or even add on because I will end up diluting what you said. But today we have live, people are so lively on YouTube and very active. I'm seeing Martin Maroy saying, unemployment and poverty are the major problems in our societies. That's true. We have Akena Julie Marshall saying he's watching from Uganda, Gulu, engaging conversations over here, and I like how we are building up going forward. Mr. Cheleka, Mr. Chuck Charles is saying hi to you, saying greetings, Mr. President. And we have Ambrose Ogwang watching from Oyam, Northern Uganda. And we have Mildred Mokumbi saying thank you, Mr. Cheleka, and she's watching from Zimbabwe. Okay, we have Maureen Obe saying we have been talking about human rights as young people. Do you think some international bodies are respecting African rights? For example, rights to live. That is a question to all of us. It's a rhetorical question. We don't have to reply it. We have Geoffrey Echemu saying that most activists are commonly funded by foreign agents, and is wondering, but why are majority not empowering or supporting those being used to do demonstrations? That is Geoffrey Echemu, the AYLF Vice President, Uganda. Thank you, everyone, for following and watching. So I would like us to steer the direction towards intersectionality, because I believe it is key to human rights activism and all activism. Intersectionality briefly is that as far as youth are concerned, means that youth's experiences of oppression or privilege are influenced by different factors such as race, gender, socioeconomic status, poverty, and so on and so forth. So Ms. Josiane, I would like to know, what role does intersectionality play in youth-led human rights movement or in activism? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary, and for that definition. And so just to be clear, intersectionality, for example, just to bring it home, could be, this is a woman, right? A woman, that's a marginalized group in of itself. This is a woman who is disabled and she's young. So this is a young disabled woman. So that is an example of intersectionality, in that there are different various reasons why she may be oppressed. Maybe if she's Black, that's race. Sex, she's a woman. Nationality, she's a refugee, for example, and she's disabled. And so she has various human rights issues. She has various reasons for oppression. And so what is the role of intersectionality? I would, just to attempt this question, I would say this helps human rights defenders understand more that these human rights issues are complex. It will help us even in preparing for advocacy. If I'm preparing to do my advocacy or my activism, I will put that into consideration to say there are people who are not just being affected by the fact that society thinks they are young and inexperienced. These people are female and they are being treated as though their ideas are not valued. These people are disabled and they feel like they're not included in some of these decisions. These people are Black and white people think of them as though they are this. Not to be racist, please, not to be racist, but I'm just trying to explain, to attempt the question. So it helps youth-led organizations to effectively advocate for human rights, because you get to understand that human rights are complex. Human rights issues are complex. Challenges are great. And you find that more than five human rights challenges, one person is experiencing all those. One person is Black. They are Black, they are female, they are disabled, they are a refugee, and they are young. Meaning that all these things are affecting that person. And how does that help us as youth-led organizations? It helps us in effectively preparing. We know that, okay, you know what? we have people that are going through this. We have people that are like this. And so it's going to help us effectively advocate. And also, it's going to create solidarity and passion-led initiatives, because I'll know that, you know what, my goodness, this person is going through all this. I'll have certain level of compassion, certain level of solidarity and passion towards the work that I do. I'll know that I'm helping marginalized communities. And so the role of intersectionality is that, one, it helps youth-led initiatives to understand just how complex human rights issues can be. It helps youth-led initiatives to be more effective in their advocacy. It creates solidarity and passion-led initiatives. It also provides for the inclusion of marginalized communities in our work, in our planning. We plan for them because that's what intersectionality is all about. That was just my brief attempt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to add, I think intersectionality brings diverse perspectives to our activism, and it helps our activism get better. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer, Ms. Josiane. Mr. Cheleka, you mentioned something to do with, you are replying, Mr. Charles was saying that young people don't really know their rights, and so they cannot even do anything about it. And you said that young people need capacity building, and you mentioned something that has to do with public resource management and social accountability, like to even improve the quality of our activism. So I would like to know, other than capacity building, what are some of the other effective strategies that we can use to be able to attract young people to join the call to action, but also to involve them in policy making policies that impact human rights, because most of these spaces will not see them, not because sometimes they don't want to participate, but sometimes they don't have the right information to participate. They don't have the right capability to participate, the right capacity to participate. So how can we go about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mary, for that question. And I'm glad that people are still following and for their comments. I'm so grateful. So apart from what I said earlier, the backbone of everything is about supporting each other, especially local initiatives. And that is so profound. And I think that is the most thing that has destroyed most brilliant ideas. And I'm talking about organic African ideas. You find that here's a young person who is in the village, rural area, but they have a brilliant idea. They begin to do their advocacy thing and so on, and then we begin to align them to political parties. We begin to align them to initiatives of being funded by different organizations or what, who are not doing the right thing and so on. And that mentality that we have, and I just found out that it's not only here in Zambia, but it is across our continent. And that is something that has led into brilliant ideas, brilliant, amazing ideas dying because people are not supporting such initiatives. And one of the things in my journey that I've noticed is because of the thing, I don't know if it's everywhere, but I think for the past few years that I've worked in the civil society spaces, what I've noticed is that when there's no transport refund, there's no t-shirt, there's not much incentives attached to you calling those people to come through, you find that you have problems in terms of mobilizing them, in terms of training people and so on. People are motivated by a bottle of water, being at fancy hotels and so on. And that is something that I have currently been trying to change in terms of the people that we invite through for such initiatives and so on, especially in rural communities and various communities. So we need to begin to embrace our ideas. We need to begin to support these ideas and initiatives, especially grassroots movements, because that is the backbone of our community. Those people face first-hand problems and infringements in terms of their human rights. Therefore, we need to support each other and also promote what someone else is doing, especially that's the social media. In terms of the resources that we talked about, the challenges that we have with resources. If we were faithful enough, if we were all convinced that these are challenges that are existing in our communities, we would have been using a community action approach where we all participate in doing something for our community. But the problem is that we lack patriotism. You find that if, Miss Mary, you have graduated from the university, you not go back to your village. You shift from your village and begin to stay in town and forget about your city. That is the lack of patriotism that as citizens, and we take it as it's a human right because we are now dealing with luxuries and so on. But we need to begin to embrace our communities, because once we come out from those villages, we begin to look down on those people who are in those settlements instead of us uplifting them and just supporting their initiatives and local ideas. The other thing that we need to also look at very critically is the issue of partnerships. As young people, as we begin our initiatives and so on, it is very important to partner with each other. Like if the AYLF is offering such initiatives where we'll be having conversations and so on, network with others, collaborate with others on ideas that you feel they cross-cut. Issues that have to uplift with your community. Know people and talk to them. And, if you have strengths in, mobilizing people, but you don't know what to tell them, mobilize those people and partner with people who have something to say. So it's not that you need always to be talking, but there are people who are specialized in these issues that we're talking about. Even just explaining human rights. Sometimes you might not even have an idea, but you have the influence in your community. You have the influence to mobilize, organize people, utilize that opportunity, create a platform for others, invite people like Miss Mary, invite people like others from Malawi or Uganda, those people who you know that they will spare their time and come and explain. That is how we are going to build and begin to demand for these human rights that we are talking about. But then in conclusion, it is very important for us to embrace the power of dialogues in our communities, because that is something that really works. And in my journey of work, like I said, I've noticed that if you call people, let's say within town, if you call people to attend a meeting, they expect you to give them transport refund, they expect you to give them t-shirts, they expect you to give them water, food and everything. But you find that their level of participation will be less. Their sharing of experiences, their sharing of what affects them in the community will be different. They'll be talking about luxuries instead of actual needs that the community needs. But if you go down into the rural areas where most people are infringed in terms of these, human rights, you find that people have real issues that they'll tell you. They will not even need transport refund from you. They'll not even need your water. They'll only need a platform to share their grievances with you. And that is so very important that we need to embrace, as human rights defenders, as people who have had this opportunity to learn what human rights are and what people need to understand and, gain from governments and so on. So we need to embrace the power of these dialogues that we need to create in our communities. Of course, even focus group discussions within our communities, littlest groups that we can organize. Let us begin to have these conversations. And the other thing, I think you also touched it, Ms. Mary, the issues to do with policy analysis and also understanding policies. That is the biggest challenge that we have, because it needs, some technical understanding of what it is. Sometimes we even accept laws that we don't even understand because we simply don't know, and we accept because it is our leader who has told us, and we believe it in them, and we've entrusted them that they are, truthful because they held the Bible and swearing in. So we believe that whatever they say is okay. But then we need to begin to have young people who have this knowledge to begin to train other young people in what policies are, what we need to analyze, what things do we need to look at. But of course, we can also embrace on how we can do social contracts in terms of monitoring community projects, monitoring what is happening in our community. That is the basic way to monitor how those policies are being implemented. Like what we do in various communities is we help people to create what we call as scorecards, where if a politician comes and says that I'll build you, hospitals, I'll create this opportunity, I'll do this, write those down and then begin to score them on how they're performing. And that is the basic way in which we can help people in marginalized communities to begin to hold their leaders accountable, but of course seeing that there are policies that the government puts in place is being utilized or being implemented or being done in a correct way. Lastly, it is that we need to encourage youth participation and to remain patriotic. Like I said, we need to be participative in the way we do. And it's so sad that this time around, when you are so interested in current affairs and everybody will be looking at you like, are you standing as our next mayor or councillor or chairperson or MP or president? Why are you so interested in these current affairs? Like, what is your interest? Which is so sad. Currently, we have a lot of things happening in Zambia, but you find that most people are not even concerned. Like even the load shedding issue, the power outages, you find that if you try to mobilize people, for example, let us do this, and you find that you'll be the only one because other people are busy and they just complain in their homes, which shouldn't be the practice. Our role as citizens, especially as young people, we need to mobilize ourselves and begin to address issues and have open, uncomfortable conversations of what we really want us to be and how we would want people to identify us as. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sheleka. I can testify that it's true. I'm among the people who left their villages and I don't want to go back. I'm guilty as charged. Anyway, thank you so much.
Are you scared of your village people?
Not really, but
I think that is
because
an
the
African thing.
opportunities are more in the town area. But we are trying to do something for Africa, and which will be able to impact even the grassroots communities up to down. So I'll do better. I'll do better, I promise. Thank you so much for that challenge. I think our time is almost up. Allow me to ask you this one last question as we conclude. Ms. Josiane, just come and tell us your advice to young people who are currently doing human rights activism, but even those who have not yet joined the cause. And please give us your call to action and your parting shots before we conclude.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, before I give my advice, let me just say that I'm very grateful, and to be sharing a platform with Mr. Mishek is it's an opportunity. It's a dream come true. Like, I didn't say this, but I didn't say this at first, but I'm sure he remembers. He's been amazing in my life. Like, he's been leading me in the right directions. He's been helping me in my human rights defending journey. And just me being on the same platform with him, I am taking note of everything that he's saying. And so, yeah, which is one of the advice I would give is look for a person who can mentor you in this, someone who's done this before and is experienced in that area. You starting out, I'm going to start with the ones that are starting out because I myself am not very experienced. I'm also starting out as a human rights defender. Look for somebody who's done that, and someone you can learn from. For me, I'm learning a lot from Mishek. He is honestly, and he's someone who is available for you if you're willing. If you're asking him a question, he's there. He's going to help you out. Look for somebody like that. You look for a mentor, someone who's done what you want to do, someone who's done that before, someone who can lead you in the right way. For me, that's Mishek, but I don't know whom you can find. So as a human rights defender, or you are starting out, look for someone you can learn from. Look for someone who's done that before, someone who's experienced in that area, so that they lead you through. And also, one of the other advices I would give is continue learning, continue gaining more knowledge, gain more skill in that area that you've chosen to defend or to talk about. If you're talking about gender equality, gain more knowledge about gender equality. Continue learning. If it's mental health advocacy, go for mental health training. Expand your knowledge and your experience about that particular field that you're engaging in. This is something that Mishek actually told me, and I'm telling it to. Okay, everything that I'm about to say, Mishek literally told me this, but it worked. So, Mishek, I'm not, copying. I've already said that I got it from you. So yes, he told me. So he told me collaborate with like-minded individuals, right? But the one that I gave you is look for someone, a mentor, someone who's done this before. Get trained, get more knowledge about the field, specialize. This is also something that Mishek told me. Human rights defending, like we've started from the very start, human rights is a it's a complex issue. It's so complex that you cannot just say I'm a human rights defender like that. Human rights defending has a lot of things that it comprises of. So try to specialize. Is it women's rights? Is it equality? Is it accountability and good governance? What is it that you're specializing in it? Once you get to that, then get more knowledge about it. Look for someone who's doing that and they're doing well, that they can help you in that journey, and be passionate about what you do. This is the biggest thing that you need, is passion, because we talked about the challenges that human rights defenders are going through. If you do not have the passion, the zeal for what you're doing, you easily get discouraged. Things like stereotypes. Mishek talked about the fact that you say, I'm 21 and people won't listen. You just say that my name is this, I'm 21. That's it. That's a red flag. So I would say be passionate about what you're doing, because once you're passionate about something, no matter whatever comes your way, you will stand your ground and you'll be able to push through. So look for a mentor. Look for somebody who can mentor you, get more knowledge and training in that particular field that you've decided to go into. And yeah, that's what I can say. Basically, just look for a mentor. Look for someone like Mishek, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Josiane. Thank you so much. Mr. Cheleka, the same question applies to you.
Thank you so much, Miss Mary, and thank you, Josiane, for your kind words. I'm really grateful and humbled. So, in conclusion, on my end is not everything that we advocate for will change. Some things will remain the same, but it doesn't mean that we should stop talking about them. Not everything will change at once. Some may take even longer. You might even die in the process, but the rest will continue and your legacy will live on. So let us keep talking and talking until one day things might change or might not, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't, continue. And in conclusion, as my last conclusion really is my favorite quote by Albert Einstein, who says, the world is not destroyed because of bad people, but it is because of the good who keep watching and seeing the bad continue. So it is not that these politicians are wrong, or leaders or community leaders or people who do the bad things in the community that destroy mostly of our communities. It is because of us who assume that we are good and we just keep looking and see things go bad. So we have a role to play in terms of just looking out for others, supporting each other, bring out ideas, and just doing our best in terms of changing the narrative, and above all, telling our stories to the world. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cheleka. And I would like to thank you, my brilliant panelists. I know that the information you've shared with us will be able to help us change our work, but also inspire us to join this work, because if we don't do this, nobody will do it. I wanted to add something on what Ms. Josiane said about mentorship. And it's really good to have mentors. We've all had mentors who have told us what to do. The good thing about mentoring is that you don't need to try and error, because this person is there to guide you. You don't need to do the same mistakes that they did. So they'll be there to guide you all through the journey. And if you don't have anybody to mentor, you can do role modeling, like Miss Josiane, the way she was talking about Mr. Cheleka. Like, if you like what Mr. Cheleka does, follow his social media, do what he does. You can even decide to dress like him, and at the end of the day, you become a better person at what you are doing. Thank you so much, everyone. Our YouTube viewers, you are the best. And I just need to tell you that we need to leverage on the tools we have, anything that we have, to be able to advocate for those whose voices often go unheard. It is up to us, me and you, because we really need concerted efforts, and together we'll be able to shape and create a just and equitable world that we need in Africa. Thank you so much. Please follow African Young Leaders Foundation on all social media platforms. Follow our panelists, because they're doing some great work and commendable work in their communities. So you can be able to follow them and maybe ask them questions, contact them for anything that you want. But also follow me on all social media platforms at Mary Joyce Takali. Thank you so much. Have a great evening and see you next time. Bye.